Hey everybody, welcome back to Zone 4. I am Brant Fowler, one of the co-hosts of Zone 4, back with another sampling from this week's episode number 194, Jaded or Bacon Pancakes. This week we have Chris Ventura of Dark Avenger Inc. on with us in Ron's absence. Ron was a little bit under the weather, so Chris was gracious enough to fill in, and he even suggested the topic, which is talking about being jaded in comics or just reading them for enjoyment, and it was a great discussion that went off onto all kinds of subtopics. So without further ado, here is a sample of this week's episode of Zone 4. And basically we're going to go into the gimmick nature of mainstream publishers, and it's going to be an interesting discussion because I'm sure views are on different sides in this particular group of people. So this should be a fun one. Chris, I'm actually going to let you kick it off. You're our guest and you came up with the topic, so go for it.
Great, right in the line of fire. Somebody's going to kill me halfway through the segment. You just knew, somebody's going to kill me when I start talking about it.
I got your back.
Welcome to the Terror Dome.
You wanted to come in the zone. This is the zone.
I don't mind. That's fine by me. I'll say what I don't. For me especially, as a kid growing up, when I started reading comic books, especially when you're young, you don't think about gimmicks. And way back when, I think this was said on the live show, the comic companies didn't do gimmicks. They didn't do, it wasn't about the companies, and that's why they almost failed. I think Mike Spiderslayer said that, or something to that matter. And actually the gimmicks and, the company stuff is what actually saved the industry. But in my opinion, too many people are focusing, like, for example, DC New 52, everybody heard it, and they're like, okay, this is DC's relaunch gimmick for the third time. I was one of the people that said that. Marvel Now, people are like, this is the new Marvel gimmick. AVX was Marvel's new miniseries gimmick. It's like, if people don't look at it as a gimmick and actually look at it as a miniseries instead of like, oh God, AVX, it's another gimmick, here we go again. Instead of looking at it that way, if you look at it on the reverse end, like with the cup half full instead of half empty, and say, okay, here's another miniseries. It's going to involve the Avengers. It's going to involve the X-Men. I think more people would enjoy stuff nowadays because, honestly, nowadays that's all the companies have is they're outdoing their own gimmick or outdoing each other's gimmicks. There's no way around it. Blackest Night, I remember they had the ring. DC Comics did the ring, and then Marvel answered it with, okay, if you rip the covers off of the books that gave you the rings and send it into Marvel, I think the store owners had to do it. We'll send you a super rare Spirit Self variant with Deadpool on it, and so many people got pissed off about that. It's like it's just companies trying to outdo themselves. But if you back away from looking at it at a standpoint where you're looking at it from the as them as companies, and you just look at it, the comic books themselves, minus the whole Marvel saying rip off covers to your DC Comics, so you can get a Deadpool variant, which I don't understand how they're actually coming back with Deadpool variants, and they're $300 for sketch covers. And there's actually somebody out there that's going to buy them. It's the same cover with no color. Seriously? But anyway, I'm sorry. I went on this way back when I started reviews with the whole Deadpool everywhere and every variant cover you can imagine. And the Gundam style thing kind of has me with the Avengers #1 has me a little bit shell shocked, but besides the point. I don't know. I just think people would enjoy comics more. See, I don't even look at it as gimmicks. A lot of people were talking down on Avengers versus X-Men. It should have been shorter. It should have been this. I agree it should have been shorter. Did I enjoy the series, though? Absolutely. Would I read it again? Yes. However, would I recommend it to everybody as miniseries of the year? Absolutely not.
Well, I mean, you bring up a great point. I think, first of all, I do think you're going to get shot with this group. But,
it's fine. It's my opinion. No. One of my friends, actually, and he's going to kill me for saying this on air, I was actually fighting myself not to say it. He tried to get into comic books. He saw my reviews, and he's like, I want to try to get into comic books. And there are a lot of people that feel this way, too. And I don't feel it's true, but he said it this way. He was buying, and then new games came out, and he's like, okay, I had to stop reading comics because Assassin's Creed 3 and everything else came out. If you're watching this, Mike, and I don't mean any Mike that people on the internet know, I'm sorry for pulling you out on this, and he's like, one of my friends came up to me and said, you know, you buy a comic, it's $2.99, $3.99, you read it once, and then that's it. You put it away, and you're never going to read it again, and if you do, you already know what happens. And it's true. But if you enjoy what you're reading, and especially because a lot of comics nowadays go one right after the story goes right after the other, and there's always something from the previous story that goes into the next story. If you enjoy reading comic books, you don't look at it that way, where you're spending $3 on a story you're only going to read once.
Well, I mean, you make some great points there. The only thing I would counter with is. Don't you think that maybe because of, I don't know how I want to say this, the companies use the gimmicks, though, to draw people in. And, like you said, it doesn't matter whether they're good stories or not sometimes, because it's done so many times and over again right after another that it becomes kind of tiresome, and you can actually sometimes see that it's just editorial influence trying to push certain characters or trying to, support the latest movie or, whatever. But I totally get what you're saying. I agreed with it to a point, because sometimes you just do have to sit back and just say, okay, I'm just going to enjoy this because it's comics. It's, it's a character I like. I'm just going to read it. I'm not going to let any of the other stuff get in my head. And, sometimes you can do that. I think sometimes you can't. And that's just me personally.
Yeah, I agree. No, I agree with the movie stuff. That's honestly, whenever they make a comic book that's based directly off of a movie. I mean, Avengers Assemble was originally based off of the premise of the Avenger movie, and then they broke away from that. Mm-hmm. I mean, comics that are based off of movies, it really, like when my brother watched Spider-Man, that's what actually got him interested in reading Amazing Spider-Man. But there was a miniseries that I think that pertained to the movie at the time. So I guess maybe for people who don't read comics, it's good, but for people that have been reading for a while, yeah, then it's more like, okay, here's Marvel or DC just trying to throw things down your throat to make you buy more. Then I would absolutely agree with that.
Well, let me ask you, John, are you able to look past like the gimmicks and the hype and everything and just enjoy a story, or does that take you completely out of it when it's so over the top like that?
A lot of the time it really does take me completely out of it, because especially lately, the story hasn't been enough to really back up the hype. I mean, when you think back in the, this isn't necessarily a new phenomenon, but when you think back a while back where when they had these big events and you had to get the exterior stories to get the whole story, which generally ticked a lot of people off.
Right.
But at least those stories were generally worth it. Now, lately, it seems like the gimmick has completely taken the place of any rational thought in the story. And, I know I complain about it all the time, but I have to go back to Avengers versus X-Men, the Versus series.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, my brother read that one. I couldn't get into that.
Yeah, and my point being that on the best day of his life, Colossus could not take out the Thing. I don't care if he's Juggernaut imbued. I don't care if he's imbued with the power of Uatu the Watcher. Nobody, you cannot take out the Thing. They proved that years ago in a Marvel 2-in-1, The Thing does not go down. So, and it really seemed like that story was all built on just the hype of the fights. you know, there's no real sense of a story in this beyond, okay, we're going to have these folks fight.
Well,
and it became that in the bigger story too. You know, that initially the story made a little sense, but you know, towards the end, it really got completely nuts. Completely.
The last issue was ridiculous, in my opinion. I don't know if you read the last issue.
Yeah.
I kind of gave up before that, honestly.
Well, you're lucky. My brother showed me the last issue, and I just sat there going, wow, this is just a cop-out issue. It was a cop-out. It really was.
Let me say this about ABX in particular. With the Versus series, if they had done it like where they had certain fights that were taking place in the main 12-issue series and only showed like bits and pieces, and then you could get the full fight in Versus.
Right.
That would have been better, because that's kind of what they did in Blackest Night. They would show certain things like Mara versus Wonder Woman, and then if you picked up the Wonder Woman series, you got to see that entire fight.
You saw the full thing.
Yeah, but you got enough of it in the main series. So if they had structured it like that, it would have gone a lot better. But I agree with you, doing something like that where it's just a throwaway series. Oh, wouldn't it be cool to throw these two characters in there and let them fight? That's kind of it's why. What's the point, you know? This has been a Gonzo Goose production.